Priti Patel, thanks so much for joining us on the show today. There's so much to talk to you about. But the reason that we're talking today is I've been doing some more work on the matter of violence against women and girls. It was something you cared about a lot as Home Secretary. And it's something that now you're not in office, that maybe you can talk about a bit more freely what was working, what wasn't working so well. And then I'll get on to daily politics a bit more, if I may, towards the end. But I wanted to kick this interview off with talking a bit about the scale of the problem. 72 women were killed by men in the year to March 2021 in domestic violence cases. 200,000 cases of sexual assault in the year to March 2022, which is probably the tip of the iceberg because many women and people will not report it. 70,000 cases of rape recorded. And in May this year, the ONS revealed 1 in 2 women and 1 in 6 men felt unsafe walking home in the dark in a quiet street near their home. Harassment, assault, rape, violence, even murder. How would you describe it? Is it a crisis? Is it an epidemic? How would you describe the problem that we are confronting?
So Beth, thank you for having me on, because these are really important and significant issues that I think as a society we have to tackle head on. We have to confront them and confront the behaviours and, you know, the causes behind them. Now, I think, first of all, it's important to say whether it's domestic abuse or violence against women and girls, it does not discriminate. It affects everyone, every gender, every race, people from all sorts of backgrounds. And that is why, certainly from my time in government and as Home Secretary, and Boris Johnson as well as Prime Minister, you know, we were resolute in terms of our determination to tackle these issues and actually almost go backwards to go forwards, to bring forward the improvements that are required. So, for example, when I became Home Secretary, the domestic abuse bill was, you know, getting ready to go through Parliament. It was going through key stages, and we now have a Domestic Abuse Act, which has gone a long way, and this is important in terms of providing the support for domestic abuse victims, which, you know, predominantly involves women, but also, let's not forget, children are caught up in that as well. Providing the safeguards for them, ensuring that they are provided with homes, for example, working with local authorities, looking at some of the domestic homicide reviews that absolutely have to come with some of the most devastating crimes, such as deaths and murders. And then, of course, let's not forget, there's been a huge amount of work, and we can talk about this a lot more, around policing, the CPS, getting cases to court, the evidential collection of data and information, case progression, all these types of things were, in my view, quite frankly, substandard and inadequate. And, of course, that is what we've spent the last 3 years working on.
Earlier today, I went to interview Sarah Crewe, who's the national lead on this, who you know well and have worked well with. And I asked her about whether the problem was getting better or worse, and why, in terms of prosecutions of rape cases, why the country is so far off sort of levels in 2016.
At a period in my career, we were able to form a specialist team here in Avon and Somerset, and we started through a number of motivated individuals looking at the problem of sexual violence. We were starting to make progress on understanding, as practitioners, how to tackle it. For a variety of reasons, not least austerity, we had to make some choices in policing, and Avon and Somerset was no different from other forces, and that specialism had to retract slightly.
Now, you became Home Secretary, obviously, in 2019, and Sarah there was talking about austerity that was probably in the first half of the term of Theresa May and to Boris Johnson. But do you recognise that, Priti, that because of funding cuts, because of austerity, that police forces had no option but to scale back?
Absolutely. I'm the first to recognise that. I mean, I've worked with Sarah. I mean, she's a remarkable leader, by the way, in policing, and the work that she's doing in this particular area as a national champion is phenomenal, and we'll talk about aspects of that. But that is the reason why, as Home Secretary, I was assiduous in my determination, number one, to back the police, but get them the resources that they needed to do their job, because they are one part of the criminal justice system. And I've always, even before becoming Home Secretary, but as a backbench member of Parliament, I've spoken about the end-to-end criminal justice system. You cannot have policing working in isolation of the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, or the courts, because if you're a victim of crime, you want to ensure that you're getting justice or access to justice, and perpetrators are being brought, you know, to heed, basically. So I've seen this in policing, and don't forget, I've worked with policing for over 3 years, not just on resourcing, but also on skills, capability, the tools, tasers, for example, but at the same time, changes to laws and legislation. And the Police Crime Sentencing in Courts Bill was just one aspect of that as well, where, again, very specifically to violence against women and girls and domestic abuse, you know, perpetrators, the sentences that perpetrators would be receiving for serious violence assault would be increased.
So when you got into the Home Office, I don't want to dwell too much on it, but if you look at police funding, it had dropped by 16% less in real terms between 2009 to 10 to 2018-19 when you arrived. And then with the CPS, MOJ budget cuts 25% in real terms over that sort of period. So when you got in there, did you see that actually there is not enough funding, we need to get more resource in?
So it's twofold, Beth, it's twofold. Number one,
it's past now.
Sure. Number one is the resourcing. I've always been, you know, I bang the drum on resourcing. But the second thing is I'm very, very assiduous about public financing and funds. You know, this is how you integrate the system. You know, so the police working with the CPS, this is actually about how we integrate all aspects of our criminal justice system. So it's not just policing in one corner and the CPS in another corner, it's bringing the teams together, which all credit to Sarah Crewe in Avon and Somerset for this particular type of work on DA and violence against women and girls. And she's brought the system together, and that is why we're now seeing good, positive outcomes.
In terms of the violence against women and girls strategy, in December 2020, you've been Home Secretary for 18 months now. You opened a call for evidence to hear directly from the public on tackling violence against women and girls. Then 3 months later, in March 2021, Sarah Everard was abducted, we now know, by a serving police officer and murdered. And it triggered this wave of protest. And then you reopened the call for evidence. What happened then, and why did you do that?
So that was a shocking period, and I think actually the whole circumstances of Sarah Everard's disappearance, let's not forget we had COVID, we were all in that COVID period. Our lives had fundamentally changed. It seemed unheard of that someone, a young girl, could go missing, you know, actually in front of us all. And I started to ask some really searching and probing questions around Sarah's disappearance, the time it's taken to get, you know, information, you know, all the basic questions around her entire disappearance, and it was just absolutely awful. And at that time, of course, you know, once we started to hear more about what had happened to Sarah, I think we should be really honest. I mean, the nation's hearts just sank. And we all felt broken in terms of what had happened to her, her disappearance, the killing, her murder, the atrocities that went with it, and actually her poor family, her poor family as well. And it just seemed right to me to reopen the consultation. There was national outpouring. There was national grief and national outpouring, and actually national, you know, just everything we saw at the time. But that reopening of the consultation, I think, did a couple of things. Number one, it just gave people who had probably never thought about letting their voices be heard in a public consultation or a government consultation, it encouraged them to come forward. And Beth, we had over 180,000 people reply and respond.
Did that surprise you or shock you or dismay? I mean...
It did and it didn't. I don't want to say it dismayed me. I looked at it as a chance, the opportunity.
Dismayed you in the sense that it's so commonplace that women are saying we're being targeted or harassed on the street.
I think, first of all, it gave them the confidence to come forward. That was the key thing. It dismayed me in the sense because it spoke about, if I may say so, sort of wider failure, state failure, sort of institutions that, perhaps, and we know, had not listened enough to those voices.
What do you mean?
So, for example, and we've heard this in rape cases before as well, not being victim-centric enough. This whole culture of disbelief. And
In
quite
the police, you
frankly,
mean?
well, across not just the police, criminal justice system.
Right.
When evidential cases were coming together, the Rape Review pointed this out very clearly. And the fact that women, I think, quite frankly, rightly so, after what had happened to Sarah, felt that this could be a moment of change. And that, for me, was a really big rallying moment, and I think became the catalyst for the changes that we've definitely seen since.
Were you dismayed by the Met's response at that time? You remember the vigil on Clapham
Oh,
Common,
absolutely.
the way that was policed. There was a moment where Cressida Dick's career was hanging by a thread.
I recall it all.
And you could have actually thrown her under the bus.
I recall it all, absolutely.
You didn't.
Well,
there was a whole moment, I remember I was covering it, it was like, is Priti Patel going to call for Cressida Dick's to resign? Because if she does, she's gone.
So it was on a Saturday night, if you remember, the whole vigil and everything else.
Yeah.
And I brought in the inspectorate, the police inspectorate, to actually look at everything that had happened and ask some searching questions. And of course, since then, Beth, let's be very, very honest, we've learnt so much more about the Metropolitan Police in terms of conduct, behaviours, attitudes, and, there is now a new chief there, Mark Rowley, who is overseeing some fundamental reforms and a plan that he and I agreed part of his 100 days when he came in. But it was absolutely appalling. And also, I think this is important to recognise as well, that lack of empathy and heart and understanding as to what women were feeling. And I think, again, it spoke of this whole them and us culture, policing. Do we trust the police? Would we engage with them? And, of course, those are the barriers that we've sought to break down since.
Do you think the way that the Met policed that sent a message to women that we don't sympathise with your experience, and they were quite heartless about it?
Well, I think that was self-evident, Beth. I really do at the time.
And did you think about asking for Cressida Dick?
I was onto her. Well, to be fair, it's not just Cressida. It was the leadership team of the Metropolitan Police.
Why didn't you?
Well,
thought it'd be more destabilising.
Well, quite frankly, there were live investigations taking place at the time anyway, and the most appropriate way was actually to call for the inspector to come in and ask some proper questions to actually make sure that, the bar was risen, the standards, appropriate standards.
Do you think that was the beginning of the end for her as the Met chief?
I think it was a range of things, to be honest. It wasn't just the one incident. Appalling though it was a range of things that we went on to see in terms of standards, conduct, the culture, the whole culture of the Met, misogyny. And obviously that's been subject to plenty of reports. There's a new chief now that's obviously a new commissioner that's overseeing the change that's required.
And you do the consultation and you get all these hundreds of thousands of responses if you add in the ones from before as well. And as a result, you put 25 million to Safer Street funds, you have the 5 million Safety for Women Night Fund. Was it ever enough? Is it ever enough in terms of what you can do?
I think it's more than money, if I may say so. These funds are really important. Safer Street Funds, I'm a big champion and advocate of that. Around the country, they're doing great things to give women confidence. This is the key thing, that they should be free and open to live their lives, go out in the evenings with their friends, etc. That's really, really important. And I think that must absolutely continue. I think the other point about this is it's the public awareness. I think we've changed attitudes, we've raised awareness. We want to give people confidence that they can come forward, seek support. But I think importantly, Beth, I say this as a mother, as a woman as well. We want to live our lives freely and openly, right? And not feel the threat of harassment.
Have you ever experienced, on a personal level, harassment or abuse? You have. Can you?
So as a politician, I've been a Member of Parliament for 12 years. Over the last 12 years, I've had consistent levels of, I think, harassment and abuse. So harassment is just intimidation, unkind things that obviously are said to me. I've had people try and follow me home, actually, as well. So all of that is unacceptable. The abuse, much of it is documented, some of it is documented, even in Parliament, you know, conduct of some MPs towards one another, and myself in particular, people saying that I have no right to speak out on certain issues because of the colour of my skin, because of my politics, for example. That's unacceptable. I've had a lot of death threats, cases have gone to court. That is all simply unacceptable.
Does it ever make you think, is it worth being in the public eye if I'm getting death threats and being abused like that?
It provides pause for thought, there's no doubt about that. But I came into politics, I believe in public service. I'm very old-fashioned in that sense, Beth. I do believe in public service.
In terms of violence against women, the rate review, the rate review in 2021 set targets to get charge levels back and prosecution levels back to rates seen in 2016-17. That's, in terms of prosecutions, just over 5,000 prosecutions a year. Do you think that target's in reach?
So I do. So I absolutely believe it is in reach. And actually, you've spoken to Avon and Somerset, you've seen the integrated work that's taken place, you've seen more cases go to court. But it's in reach for not just those reasons, it's in reach because of the support that's actually going in for women. So, you know, the independent sexual advisors, the IDVAs. For too long, we've seen a lot of attrition. You know, I used to spend a lot of time with victims of crime as a backbench MP, and you'd see people give up because of the processes, you know, long drawn-out processes. Digital forensics, for example, being too intrusive, handing over your mobile phones. We've changed that. We have changed that, and that is really important. So it is within reach.
And Sarah Crewe was hopeful it was as well, but the funding cannot be taken away.
Of course not. Of course not. The other point to make as well
is that a message? I'm going to come on to Liz, but is that a message to the government as well?
So it absolutely
idea of
is.
cutting funding.
So
no.
So Beth, I think a couple of things here. Basically, we have been very clear around Operation Satira, the work that Sarah Crewe and the team are doing. This is being rolled out to other police forces around the country. That has to happen. That absolutely has to happen. And to be fair, it is happening. I know it's happening. But also it's that integration across the criminal justice system, the CPS, the support that goes in from the grassroots, the community organisations, the IDVAs. You know, I met them when I last saw Sarah about 6 weeks ago. These are the ones that are making a positive impact. And they are the ones that will hold the hands of the victims and ensure that they are supported. That money cannot go, and the MOJ are absolutely supporting that, and it's important that we do that. You know, when you're in government, yes, there are plenty of choices, but at the end of the day, you know, we have to be on the side of the victims of crime, ensure that we're supporting them. We want to prevent crime as well, obviously, but we have to absolutely ensure that people are supported. Lives are devastated through these awful crimes, they really are.
Do you worry sometimes that some of the measures that your administration put in under Boris Johnson, because this is effectively a new administration, that they're undermining potentially some of the work? So not seeming, you're talking about being on the side of victims, but Robert Halfon was talking yesterday about not being on the side of working people. Do you worry about that a bit?
Well, look, I mean, first of all, this government, the new government as well, all of us were elected on the 2019 manifesto. And, you know, my time in government, you know, was literally focused on delivering on manifesto commitments. It's all about the people. All about the British people. You know, we care about the public. I always called them the people's priorities, as did Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. I believe in that. I absolutely believe in that. That's our duty. That's our responsibility. And, you know, I know my colleagues in government understand that.
You didn't run. Lots of people thought you might. You didn't run for leadership. Neither did you come out in support for either candidate. Was that because you didn't much like the look of either of them?
Well, I've always said that I was going to put literally party politics to one side because I had huge responsibilities as Home Secretary. For me, the national security and my constitutional role in government, and I don't want to recount what happened at the time. It was chaotic over the summer. I think the public saw that. I had a duty to carry on with my job. And Beth, you can't be Home Secretary and then come out and start joining political campaigns and things of that nature. You know, I've always taken my role seriously, and that was a position that I feel was right. I put the interests of the country before party politics.
You might cost you a cabinet job, though.
That for me was not even a consideration. I had the privilege of serving as Home Secretary, and putting my country first was always my priority.
It's been pretty chaotic since the summer as well, I have to say. You said in your resignation letter you give Liz Truss, your support from the backbenches. Is she making that hard for you at the moment?
Well, look, I've said this. She's the leader of our party. I was at conference last week, Beth, and I said this at conference as well. We do have to come together. We've got a clear vision and a clear mandate for the country. It's important that we rally behind that and just start delivering it.
Let me put it another way, and I won't keep pressing you, but a clear mandate for the country. Is she muddying the waters by introducing policies not agreed by Cabinet, not in the manifesto, and that has spooked the market, some of the tax measures, for example? Do you think that is muddying the waters?
Well, look,
look,
my message is very clear. We absolutely need to get back to delivering for the British public. And that is based on the 2019 manifesto. But at the same time, we've got to unite and deliver for the country. You know, the country is experiencing very, very hard and difficult times right now. That is self-evident. Yes, through actions of the government. And it is important that we put the public first. The winter is going to be hard. There's good work that's taken place, actually, on energy price caps. And, you know, all of those measures, I think it would be useful actually now to just make sure that we put the public interest first, deliver for the public and make sure that we are giving them the support that they need through, Beth, what is clearly and self-evidently going to be some very challenging and
I'm going to ask you one thing, because other colleagues have said it, and it's that the reversal of the idea of the corporation tax cut. Do you think that would be sensible now, given what's going on in the markets? If you want to put the country first,
sure,
you need a stable market.
There's an irony to this, Beth, which is market forces will probably dictate some of these changes now.
So you think they'll be bounced into?
I think some of this, you know, the market is going to dictate this, primarily because, you know, we want to see stability. Stability is absolutely crucial for everyone to carry on living their lives, for the institutions to function, but actually for the British people to have this, you know, the stability that they need in their lives as well. And by that as well, I mean mortgages, interest rates, all those crucial levers.
So you think that they should do it, or you just think they're going to be forced into it?
Well, look, those are discussions, obviously, that will take place, and I'm not going to preempt anything, but I genuinely think, from what we're seeing, the markets will probably dictate something.
OK, and my final question to you, you were Home Secretary for 3 years, incredibly busy, insanely busy job, and now you kind of have stopped, you're on the backbenches. What's next for you? Do you want to go back into government? Do you think you might seek a career? You had a successful career before this, or is your heart always going to be in politics?
Well, look, it was the greatest honour, it's the greatest privilege to be Home Secretary. There's no doubt about that. And toughest job in government as well, famously so. I'm a public servant.
And was it the toughest
job?
job?
Yeah, no doubt about that, no doubt about that. You know, you're responsible for national security. There are things that I know that many other people never, ever know. And I was making life and death decisions on a daily basis alongside some of the issues that we've been speaking about, but even much wider than that. You know, look at the legislation that I've steered through Parliament, the changes that we made to migration.
It must be very weird
So it is.
Stop doing it.
Well, of course. But I am a public servant first and foremost. Yes, I had a career previously, but I chose to come into public service. And I do believe, it may be unfashionable to say that, I believe in serving my country. And that's what I hope to continue to do.
OK, Priti Patel, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.